Hello, I'm Elaine, and I welcome you to ethBeats, Lessons in Graceful Living. Today, we are pleased to have with us Suhaimi Zainul-Abidin, who is CEO of Quantedge Capital, a successful hedge fund founded in Singapore. He's also a director of Quantedge Foundation. We will hear about Quantedge Capital and also the philosophy behind Quantedge Foundation a little later. Prior to him joining Quantedge in 2013, Suhaimi was a leading banking and finance lawyer. Again, more on this later. Suhaimi holds several board and equivalent positions at a number of Singapore government-related agencies and entities, including the National Environment Agency and the SkillsFuture Singapore Agency. He's passionate about leadership development, business strategy, social impact, governance, and risk management. One thing I will not forget is something Suhaimi had said in an earlier interview. And if I may take the liberty of paraphrasing it, Suhaimi said, "The whole point about making money is to mobilize capital in order to make real change. This is a long fight, and this is where we will devote our intellectual capital." So what struck me was the intentionality behind this. The energy and capital and intellectual capital being devoted to making change. Of course, energy also in building a robust investment portfolio, etc. But really, it's how intentional it is. This made me reflect on the sense of purpose for each of us and why we do what we do. But before exploring this, I wanted to know about Suhaimi as a person and what drives him. So I'll pose him a few questions.
Sure.
So Suhaimi, you started your career as a lawyer and you now find yourself as CEO of a hedge fund. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's true. It's when I look back, of course, I was a lawyer some time ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. And that kind of tells you never really know where you're going to end up. But 10 years ago, I was at Allen & Gladhill. I originally started there as a practice trainee in 2004, and then got called to, eventually became partner in the banking and finance practice about 2009, and stayed until 2013. So in that 10 years, I outlasted many of my peers already. And at that point in time, I probably felt I was going to be at A&G forever. It was a great place to be. It was kind of like where I grew up, and I was doing great work, right? Cutting edge work. I was really happy where I was. I enjoyed it tremendously. Undoubtedly grueling, right? Physically, mentally, it's tough, but it's where I grew up. It's where I cut my teeth and grew professionally. So I didn't think that I would ever leave, but sometime in 2013, I remember this conversation really vividly because one of my friends gave me a call. I was in camp. I was doing national service.
Okay.
He gave me a call and I said, "Hey, have you ever thought about joining a hedge fund?" Right. My answer was pretty straight, like, "Nope, not interested. I love what I do. I'm happy where I am." And that hedge fund was obviously Quantedge, which I had some familiarity with. I happened to be an investor in the fund a bit earlier.
Oh, okay.
And the guy who called me was a friend of mine, the founder of Quantedge, and I happened to have, be in school with him. Took a while, a couple of months for them to convince me to join Quantedge. It wasn't an easy decision. Being someone who thought that this was the career for me, being a lawyer. But what really excited me about that opportunity it wasn't about higher pay, certainly not that. It wasn't about better work-life balance. But what really excited me was the opportunity, I think, to grow together with a somewhat young firm, right? To build something together with a bunch of really talented individuals where you think the sky is the limit, and that was really exciting. Right, so I eventually moved in 2013 to join Quantedge, and initially it was to be general counsel, and then slowly sort of crept into more and more sort of areas of the firm, operations, risk management, investor relations, and eventually, exposure to those areas became responsibility over those areas, and eventually CEO. So that's how I got there. But it's 10 years since I've been at Quantedge.
And
So it's been a while.
Do you miss the previous life as a lawyer?
Absolutely.
Ah,
Absolutely. I
okay.
do miss legal practice.
Which aspects?
Although I must qualify that by saying I'm probably looking into the past with somewhat rose-tinted glasses, right? Because as a lawyer, you tend to sort of complain a little bit about how tough life is. But looking back, actually, it's a great career. There's certainty in terms of the progress that you're going to make. There's assurance in the fact that if you really work hard, put your mind and soul into it, that you'll get rewarded for it, right? So that's a great career to have. But there are certain aspects that I like more than others, obviously. I mean, there's the baseline competencies, right? You need to be good at certain things. There's knowing the law, there's giving advice, there's documentation, negotiation. I like negotiation. I like bringing deals to a close, seeing clients celebrate. But the part that for me was most interesting about legal practice was actually the business side of it. Right? Strategizing how to expand your offering, your product offering, your suite of skills, pricing, market strategy, how to get more clients, how to build a team, how to be more profitable, which is often not sort of considered when you think about a legal career. But actually, the business of law is just like any other professional services business, right? It's a real business that you got to think about growth. You got to fight for your piece of the pie, and that's actually the part that I really like.
Yeah, you mentioned risk and wanted to ask you, for example, you sit on a number of boards, ranging from statutory boards and agencies, private funds and charities. How have you approached risk management across these sectors?
Well, I would say that risk management across the sectors, there's a lot of similarities and differences. I think a healthy way to look at it is to always have a good dose of fear within you. I mean, to be honest, look, when you look at risk management, when you think of risk management, you need to be quite deliberate about it, right? You need to be very detailed. You need to take a wide variety of views into consideration. But again, as a starting point, you need to be fearful. You can't be paralyzed by fear, obviously. But my view is, if you lack fear, then that's when you get into trouble, right? It's the Icarus paradox, right? What enables you to succeed and to fly higher can get you in trouble if you're not, fearful of the risks.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is for me, in many of the risk audit or risk committees that I sit on, our job, unfortunately, is to think of the worst case scenario. Yeah. Right? We want to think of what could possibly happen. We need to think about all the contributors to that risk. We need to think about probability and severity, think about ways to avoid it. If you can't avoid it, then mitigate it. I mean, that's the standard sort of matrix for coming up with a risk management framework. But I think also one of the things that we could do more is to think about the opportunities that come about from risk. And so if you see a particular risk that you think needs to be addressed, in addition to just mitigating and avoiding, can we turn it into a strength? What can we do? I mean, sometimes it requires quite novel, even extreme solutions, but it has been done. Right? People have turned weakness into strength, and I think that is a good outcome, out of risk management. We shouldn't think of risk management always as a defensive mechanism.
So, in relation to Quantedge, are you able to share specifically what might be the biggest risks on the horizon?
For Quantedge, we're in the business of investment management, as I mentioned before. So when most people think about investment management, they're thinking, right, you're taking positions, making investments, making money. And people often ask, one of the first questions a prospective investor will ask is, what kind of returns do you expect to make? The reality is, you can never predict what your returns are going to be.
Of course.
Right? What we do, and what actually most investment managers do, is to understand the risk that you're taking. And of course, for all risks that you take, there is an expectation of returns. But you can't control the returns. You can control the risk. So for Quantedge, our approach, and it's embedded within how we do things, is to not just try to understand the risk, but to quantify the risk. And based on the risks that you're willing to take, then you take positions in the market, right? So for Quantedge, of course, there are many, many types of risks. The biggest risk that we face on a daily basis would be, market risk, market fluctuations, things that happen in the markets, which is the next bank that's going to fail, what's the interest rate change going to be, stuff like that. There are also less obvious risks, counterparty risks, liquidity risks, all sorts of things, right? So we're constantly on the lookout for all these things, trying to understand it, and then calibrating our positions accordingly. But there are also very big risks that we need to be mindful of that's a bit harder to sort of quantify. And to me, one of the biggest risks, not just for Quantedge, but across the board on all the organizations that I'm involved with, I would say the biggest risk is climate change. Climate change is the biggest risk that we need to be aware of, right? And I classify that as a risk for many reasons, in the sense that we all know, well, most people would agree at least, it took us a long time, many decades for us to get here, in the sense that everybody sort of really realizes what a big issue this is. But it's still a risk in the sense that we don't really know how bad it's going to be. I think we're starting to feel it now. People have been talking about it for ages, but finally, I think you would say we're starting to feel the heat, right? The increased temperatures, rising, sea levels, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And often when it comes to dangers like that, you only start to really understand and appreciate and be compelled to take action when you really feel it.
Yeah.
So we're starting to feel it now, and I think people are sort of compelled to take action, but we're already a bit late, right? This is an existential issue. Are we going to be fast enough to reverse the damage that's done, right? So I think this is the biggest risk that's facing us, because the problem with this risk is you can't avoid or mitigate it as an individual, right?
Exactly.
As one person, you can't solve it. You can't save yourself alone. And even companies can't do that by themselves. Countries can't do that by themselves. You need concerted action. So that's why to me, it's the biggest risk that we're all facing.
Oh, that's very sobering because, because it requires collective effort, which is one of the most difficult things to mobilize and achieve.
And it's a race against time. We don't know whether we're going to be fast enough now. I mean, I'm an optimist. I don't think there's any point being anything else but an optimist. But as optimistic as you can be, it's not enough, right? You need to invest into finding the solutions. Then you need people to be aligned in terms of deploying those solutions. I mean, we can all do our little bits, right? You can reuse, recycle, reduce, all those kinds of things. But if we don't reduce carbon emissions, we're all in trouble.
Yeah, can't disagree. You are also involved in the corporate purpose agenda in Singapore. Can you tell us about it and how is this important?
That's a really exciting space. When we think about what we need to do, not just climate change wise, but in terms of making this whole world a better place, I think we can do a lot if we galvanize for-profit organizations, amongst others, all kinds of corporates, right, to have the right sort of mindset when it comes to doing business. So there was an Alliance for Action, or there is an Alliance for Action on corporate purpose. This is in line with or as part of the SG Together sort of movement. And they came up with a corporate purpose framework, blueprint really, that helps companies to adopt and embrace corporate purpose, this idea of corporate purpose. And maybe another way to look at it is to imagine Singapore, right, a country, small country, where businesses obviously are influential, they're a big part of life, and have the ability to change the outlook in Singapore. If every company thinks about business as a means to improve Singapore, to better Singapore as a society, right? Looking at various pillars, right? We're talking about economy, people, society, environment, governance. I mean, those 5 pillars. If everyone takes concrete steps to sort of align everything they do towards improving society, towards a corporate purpose, then I think we can achieve a lot. Right? So essentially what you want to do is for every company to say, it's not just about making money. right? It's about finding that corporate purpose where my business can actually help society. So that's the overall sort of intent. We want all companies to be a force for good, right? And if that is embedded within their ethos, their culture, then it sort of percolates down, right? The leaders start thinking about it, the employees start thinking about it, from the employees it goes down to families, so it becomes a way of life. Like everybody knows that, look, we're all here to do good. When someone does good, everybody benefits. And I think companies have a very big role to play.
So is it gaining traction?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'm involved in this via the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, NVPC.
Okay.
So they've been a big champion for this. In fact, their mandates to actually get more companies on board, help them through the process. So we've got a long line of companies that have signed up. And the companies that have signed up are not necessarily those that have already achieved that. I mean, it's not like they know what to do exactly, but most of them want to get on the journey. And that's really important because I think it is about learning and improving along the way. Yeah.
Oh, that's good to hear. Well, to wrap up, would you give us one or two takeaways?
Maybe I'll talk a bit about something a bit different from what we've spoken about so far. I just wanted to share something. I just came back from a trip to London.
Yes.
Where I was quite privileged to spend a couple of days in London Business School. So a couple of friends, we discussed all sorts of things. And we do case studies, learning about how other businesses react to many different challenges. One of the interesting sessions was actually about resilience. Okay, so when I first entered into the class, I was thinking, oh, not resilience again. It's been talked to death, right? Resilience. But the conversations that came out were quite interesting. And we sort of came to this conclusion that, most people will be able to define resilience, right? They talk about the ability to withstand pressure, the ability to bounce back from adversity. Okay, fine. But what does that really mean? And how do you build resilience? And I thought maybe I would share this because I find it really intriguing. So we sort of boiled it down to two cornerstones, two things that are really, really important. And the first one is actually gratitude. So whenever you come to that point where you sort of lose hope because things get really tough, things don't go according to plan, and you feel, oh gosh, I'm not gonna be able to rebound, I'm not gonna make it, plans have failed. I think the first thing you need to do is to be grateful for everything else that you have.
Right.
Because no matter what, it could be worse. And you actually have a lot of things going for you. And once you have that, then that's the base, that's the platform, because you're not going to sink below that because there are good things going for you. So gratitude is the first one. And then we came to the second sort of conclusion after some debate, right? The second thing that's really going to propel you up is this desire of, I wouldn't say desire, it's more a belief that you can do better. Which is a bit distinct from feeling like, especially when you're a bit disappointed, people tend to feel it's not really fair, I deserve better. And that's a negative thought. But once you establish, look, I have a lot to be grateful for, and I want to do better and I can do better, that then establishes sort of the next step up, because you then regain control over yourself to know that actually I can get out of this. It is within my control and I want to do it. So I thought just to share this, because I thought in combination, the gratitude together with this desire to do better, which puts control back in your hands, those two things in combination will actually result in resilience, which I think people so often sort of think about it, right? They say it's necessary. We don't know whether there's enough resilience within the company, the organization, the country, the youth. And I think if you boil it down to those two things, everyone can have a resilient mindset.
I think what you've mentioned are basically the tools that within
Exactly.
us
Yeah.
we can harness to keep going despite,
Indeed.
what's happening. Right. Okay. Suhaimi, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today.
You're most welcome.
ethBeats is a podcast of the ethB platform supported by RHT Grace Institute, a non-profit organization. You may find out more information in the notes to this podcast.